chess match unfolding on a global scale, where one player, seemingly calm and traditional, makes moves that consistently surprise and even alarm observers. Pope Leo XIV stepped onto the world stage exuding an aura of peace, wisdom, and profound fidelity to the Church. His words are clear, his presence serene, his pronouncements often imbued with a sense of divine purpose. He speaks frequently of God, of tradition, of unity. If one were to judge him solely by his eloquent speeches and pastoral pronouncements, there would seem to be little cause for concern. He appears, to all outward appearances, to be precisely the spiritual leader many had hoped for. But what if, beneath this veneer of traditional rhetoric and tranquil demeanor, the Pope's actions are telling a very different, and to some, deeply unsettling story? What if the individuals he is strategically placing in positions of immense power across the globe reveal a hidden agenda, a quiet revolution masked by reassuring words? This is the perplexing paradox unfolding within the Catholic Church today, a contradiction that has left countless faithful Catholics bewildered, raising the startling question: is Pope Leo XIV's papacy a masterclass in subtle subversion, or a complex dance between continuity and carefully orchestrated change? The dissonance between Pope Leo XIV's words and his actions has become increasingly apparent, particularly through the pivotal appointments he has made to lead important parts of the Church around the world. One striking example that sent ripples through certain Catholic circles was his choice of a new bishop to lead the Diocese of San Diego. At first glance, many within the Church initially considered this a commendable choice. Prior to his new appointment, when he served as an auxiliary bishop, he was widely praised for his pastoral care, his administrative acumen, and his humble service to the local church. He seemed a solid, traditional choice, focused on the spiritual well-being of his flock. However, once he officially took on his new, prominent role as a diocesan bishop, a noticeable shift in his priorities and public persona occurred. Instead of primarily focusing on the specific spiritual and administrative matters of his local church, which is the traditional remit of a bishop, he began to very publicly and vocally speak out on highly charged, divisive political issues, particularly those surrounding immigration. He deliberately stepped into contentious political debates, often advocating positions that many, including a significant portion of Catholics within his own diocese, did not agree with. This engagement in partisan politics, rather than universal spiritual guidance, immediately raised eyebrows, marking an early instance where the Pope's apparent emphasis on unity seemed to clash with the actions of his chosen leaders. The most talked about and, for many, deeply unsettling decision from the new Pope came even more recently, and it has sparked profoundly strong reactions from faithful Catholics around the world, igniting a firestorm of discussion across social media and traditional Catholic news outlets. According to official reports, this decision involves the pivotal appointment of a new archbishop in Australia. The news was first shared with an air of expectation by the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference on their official website, prominently displaying the headline, "Pope Leo appoints new Archbishop of Brisbane." The name of the appointee, Bishop Shane Mackinlay. For many, this name may not have been immediately familiar, as Bishop Mackinlay had been serving diligently in Australia for years, most recently as the Bishop of Sandhurst, a diocese located in regional Victoria. However, as photos of him circulated quickly online following the announcement, a subtle but significant detail began to emerge and become a topic of discussion among observant Catholics. His style of clothing, specifically his clerical attire, was noted by some viewers as being somewhat unusual for a bishop of the Latin Rite. Typically, bishops are seen wearing the customary black clerical attire, sometimes with a suit jacket or a Roman collar, signifying their role and adherence to tradition. While clothing styles can indeed vary, Such visual differences often become a point of careful discussion and sometimes concern when new church leaders are introduced, as they can be interpreted as symbolic of broader leanings or intentions. The Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference, perhaps seeking to set a positive tone, issued an unequivocally supportive statement about the appointment. In their official words, the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference has welcomed the appointment by Pope Leo of a new Archbishop of Brisbane, the Most Reverend Shane Mackinlay, who is currently Bishop of Sandhurst in regional Victoria. The announcement was formally shared by Archbishop Timothy Costello, the current president of the Bishops' Conference, who expressed his clear support for the Pope's choice, implicitly endorsing Bishop Mackinlay's suitability for such a significant archdiocesan role. In the official statement, Archbishop Timothy Costello went further, praising the new appointee and highlighting his specific experience and qualifications for the demanding role. He stated, "The Archbishop-elect's pastoral experience in his home diocese of Ballarat and his leadership in the Diocese of Sandhurst, together with a strong academic background, will serve him well as he takes on this new role in the Archdiocese of Brisbane." Archbishop Costello also added significantly that Bishop Mackinlay's contributions to ecumenical and interfaith dialogue have also been a key part of his work within the Bishops' Conference. This particular emphasis on ecumenical and interfaith work, while presented in a positive light, was immediately noted by many observers as it points directly to one of the main areas of public discussion and indeed controversy surrounding the appointment, given the current climate of theological debate within the Church. Almost immediately after the announcement of Bishop Mackinlay's appointment to Brisbane, public attention swiftly turned to a past interview he had given, one that would quickly send shockwaves through traditional Catholic communities worldwide. In that interview, shared on a podcast by the National Catholic Reporter, a publication known for its progressive leanings, Bishop Mackinlay made a specific comment that drew significant and immediate attention, and indeed, widespread alarm. He stated, without equivocation, "I'm glad it's being discussed, and if it were to be that the outcome was for ordination to the diaconate to be open to women, I'd certainly welcome that." This statement, coming from a newly appointed archbishop, a man now elevated to a position of even greater influence by Pope Leo XIV, has sparked intense and widespread debate, particularly because Bishop Mackinlay has been intimately involved in drafting discussions related to the ongoing synod on synodality proceedings, including crucial topics that directly touch on church doctrine, structure, and the very nature of holy orders. Many commentators, especially those from traditionalist and conservative camps, immediately raised serious concerns that such remarks, from a key figure handpicked by the Pope, may signal profound changes being actively considered behind the scenes, hidden within the seemingly benign discussions of the Synod. As the synodal process continues its journey towards further sessions in October 2024, questions remain, more urgent than ever, about the precise direction these conversations may ultimately take. Further fueling these concerns, other prominent church officials deeply involved in the synodal process, such as the Relator General Cardinal Jean-Claude Hollerich, have also spoken openly about their hopes for radical reform and a greater, more radical form of inclusion within the Church's ministerial structure. These ongoing statements and actions, from individuals seemingly aligned with the Pope's own choices, strongly suggest that deeper, more controversial changes may indeed be explored, debated, and potentially implemented in the months and years to come, profoundly altering the landscape of Catholic practice. Some astute church observers have noted that Pope Leo XIV, despite his traditional rhetoric, appears to subtly support the same ideas and directions mentioned by Bishop Mackinlay and others. For example, the very idea of allowing women to become deacons, a topic that has been debated within academic and progressive theological circles for some time, has now been discussed more openly and with less resistance in recent months, gaining significant traction. While the topic has been part of church debates for some time, the public support from leaders directly involved in key church discussions and elevated by the Pope himself has drawn new, intense, and often worried attention, signaling a potential shift in momentum. The Synod on Synodality was initially described in broad terms as a way to explore how the Church listens, discerns, and works together more collaboratively, fostering a spirit of dialogue and shared journey. But behind the scenes, and increasingly in public discourse, many devout Catholics believe that the process is moving relentlessly toward fundamental changes on several highly sensitive and potentially explosive topics, including priestly celibacy, LGBT+ issues, and, as evidenced by Mackinlay's comments, the role of women in ordained ministry. So far, there hasn't been much public sign that the Synod is heading in a more traditional direction, or that it intends to reinforce existing doctrinal positions. If anything, the prevailing rhetoric and emerging proposals suggest the opposite. When Pope Leo XIV first took office, he made it explicitly clear that he planned to continue the reforms initiated by his predecessor, Pope Francis. At first, some believed he was primarily speaking about crucial financial reforms, especially those involving the long-troubled Vatican Bank, which has indeed been in dire need of improvement and transparency for decades. However, Pope Leo has frequently spoken about synodality, without clearly explaining what he precisely means by it, leaving the term open to wide, often conflicting interpretations. For some, this ambiguity has raised profound questions about the kind of deeper, more structural changes that may be quietly, yet decisively, unfolding beneath the surface of his pontificate, masked by a language that is simultaneously reassuring and vague. Further concerns have been significantly raised about Bishop Mackinlay himself, independent of his statements on the diaconate. Earlier this year, a controversial display was placed inside the very cathedral he oversees in Sandhurst, and it caused a strong, immediate, and widely documented negative reaction from many in the local Catholic community and beyond. The display was controversially titled The Wands, and it was publicly promoted as a spiritual art project. According to its official description, it was made up of 5 distinct sculptures, all carved from the same one-year-old tree that had coincidentally fallen during a storm. These 5 sculptures were strategically placed around different sites in the area, including prominently inside the sacred space of the cathedral itself. Each sculpture was intended to represent a different stage or theme in life, given rather abstract names like the amoeba, the bowl of plenty, transcendence, and the river of tears. The project explicitly used symbols and language that were profoundly unfamiliar to, and often in stark contrast with, most traditional Catholic artistic and theological traditions. In a particularly alarming detail for many faithful, one of the wands was even described as being directly linked to a figure called the Wounded Healer, who, in its description, carries souls across a symbolic river, references that immediately reminded many observant Catholics of non-Christian, even pagan, beliefs or practices jarringly out of place in a Catholic cathedral. Photos of the specific sculpture titled Transcendence, prominently placed in Sacred Heart Cathedral, Bishop Mackinlay's principal church, were later widely shared online, sparking outrage. The accompanying text near the sculpture spoke vaguely of mystery, spiritual gifts, and trusting in something referred to as the great mystery of God. While the project was publicly promoted as art and defended on artistic grounds, many local Catholics felt profoundly uncomfortable and even spiritually disturbed by the symbols and themes presented. For them, it did not reflect the deeply held faith traditions of the Church, and the choice to display it inside a consecrated cathedral, a space reserved for the holy sacrifice of the Mass and the sacraments, sparked a wide and bitter public debate, a stark example of clashing spiritual sensibilities. Indeed, Many local Catholics expressed immediate and profound concern after the installation was unveiled, feeling a sense of spiritual disorientation. While the universal themes of life, mystery, and spiritual reflection can certainly often be beautifully shown through traditional Christian symbols and sacred art, this particular display took a distinctly different, non-Christian approach, and not everyone agreed with its presence in such a sacred space. A group called Family Life International Australia powerfully posted about the exhibit on social media, drawing widespread attention to the artwork placed inside the Sacred Heart Cathedral. The piece, titled Transcendence, was just one of 5 sculptures included in a broader art series called The Wands, with other installations located throughout the city of Bendigo. According to public information, the artwork was installed with explicit permission from the diocese and was set to remain in the cathedral for about 3 months. Visitors were invited to view and reflect on it during that time. The installation was strategically scheduled to coincide with the ending of a local spiritual pilgrimage, further blurring the lines between Catholic devotion and secular art. The artwork's design, with its 5 distinct parts, reminded some astute observers of the 5 wands symbol found in tarot imagery, a direct connection to occult practices, deepening the concerns of many who saw it as spiritually compromising. Each sculpture in the series represented a different phase or concept, and the cathedral served as one of the 5 locations in the overall project, making it an integral part of a controversial whole. Following the deeply unsettling installation, a petition was swiftly launched online, calling for an immediate response to the event and the removal of the art. Though it received limited mainstream attention, the petition powerfully reflected the grave concern of some faithful who were especially troubled by the timing, as the display took place during Lent, a deeply sacred and penitential season for Catholics, typically reserved for prayer, fasting, and spiritual reflection, not experimental art that invoked pagan symbolism. Over the years, some cathedral spaces in different parts of the world have, regrettably, hosted contemporary or experimental art during Lent, which has occasionally led to intense debate about the appropriateness of such displays in sacred spaces, often seen as a secularization of the holy. In this particular case, individuals who reached out to the diocese to voice their profound concerns were met with an automated response, a form letter that offered little solace. The message blandly explained that the installation was merely a work of art and that it had been approved as part of a larger public exhibition, emphasizing that there was no cause for concern, effectively dismissing the spiritual anxieties of the faithful. Following persistent public concern and widespread criticism over the sculpture installation in Sacred Heart Cathedral, it was later quietly reported that the bishop, facing mounting pressure, requested subtle changes to the artist's official website. Specifically, the artist was asked to remove or revise certain references that many had viewed as spiritually inappropriate or even syncretistic, particularly those connecting the art to non-Christian spiritual concepts. This decision, however, did not significantly ease the profound concerns for many local Catholics. Some believed that merely altering the website, a superficial change, did not address the deeper, more fundamental issue of the display being held in a consecrated sacred space. They felt the symbols used in the exhibit were fundamentally inconsistent with Catholic values and doctrine, and could actively confuse or mislead the faithful, particularly the young. As these concerns grew, some voices within the diocese began publicly calling for the bishop's resignation, seeing his approval of the wands as a profound dereliction of his pastoral duty. Critics argued that by approving the installation and allowing its display inside the cathedral, the bishop had not done enough to safeguard his community from possible spiritual confusion and even danger, failing in his role as shepherd. While opinions naturally varied on the matter, the situation undoubtedly stirred strong, often passionate reactions within parts of the diocese, revealing deep divisions. It was not long after this significant controversy surrounding the wands display that Bishop Shane Mackinlay was appointed as the new Archbishop of Brisbane by Pope Leo XIV. Many astute observers noted, with considerable alarm, that this pivotal decision came even after the controversy had gained widespread public attention and had been widely discussed in Catholic media. This timing was particularly telling. It's crucial to understand that appointments of bishops are not made lightly. They are the culmination of careful review and recommendation by church leadership, a process that takes months, if not years, to complete. Before becoming pope, Leo XIV himself served as the influential prefect for the dicastery for bishops, the very Vatican office responsible for evaluating and recommending new bishops around the world. Therefore, he would have been intimately familiar with the process and almost certainly aware of any controversies surrounding a candidate. The promotion of Bishop Mackinlay, despite the recent uproar over the wands, signaled to many that church leadership, including the Pope himself, continued to support him wholeheartedly in his new, more prominent role, essentially endorsing his prior actions and perhaps his broader theological leanings. At the very same time, the Vatican launched a renewed and invigorated message encouraging Catholics worldwide to support the traditional collection known as Peter's Pence. This annual initiative invites the faithful to help fund the charitable and pastoral work of the Pope and the Holy See, traditionally seen as a sign of filial devotion to the successor of Peter. In a video shared by Vatican News on social media, viewers were invited to contribute, with the message highlighting traditional themes of unity, hope, and unwavering support for those in need, particularly the poor and marginalized. The video explicitly stated, "With your donation to Peter's Pence, you offer tangible support as the Holy Father takes his first steps as Pope, helping him proclaim the gospel to the world and extend a hand to our brothers and sisters in need." This renewed push for donations, strategically timed with the early days of Pope Leo's pontificate, is part of a broader effort to connect his leadership with traditional values and support for global missions. While some Catholics welcomed the message as a call to solidarity, others shared decidedly mixed reactions on social media platforms. As with many online discussions, the response reflected a wide range of views, from fervent support for the Pope to ongoing, deeply rooted concerns about church policies, liturgical practices, and departures from long-standing traditions. Some online users raised broader questions about fundamental liturgical practices and recent church teachings, including sensitive topics like the traditional Latin Mass and recent Vatican documents that have restricted its celebration. These passionate conversations continue to take place in countless Catholic communities today, reflecting the diverse and often polarized views within the global church, a sign of deep internal struggle. Among many Catholics today, there is a growing and increasingly vocal conversation about the crucial importance of tradition and the direction of church leadership under Pope Leo XIV. In particular, those who attend the traditional Latin Mass, often affectionately referred to as the TLM, have voiced a strong, collective desire for this venerable form of worship to be not only supported, but actively respected and fostered by church authorities. Online, some users have openly stated they would be far more willing to contribute financially to church initiatives, including Peter's Pence, if certain controversial decisions were revisited and ideally reversed. One prominent example is the widespread request to lift or significantly reverse the severe restrictions placed on the traditional Latin Mass by Pope Leo's predecessor. Others mention profound concerns about the perceived weakening or ambiguity of church teachings, especially when they feel the core message of the Catholic faith has become unclear, diluted, or even compromised over time, causing confusion and spiritual disorientation among the faithful. A common recurring theme among these comments and discussions is a fervent call for clarity and consistency from church leadership, Many faithful Catholics sincerely believe that when church leaders speak clearly, unequivocally, and consistently uphold traditional values, teachings, and practices, it helps to restore much-needed trust and fosters greater unity. Until then, some faithful have openly stated they are hesitant, even unwilling, to fully support certain appeals or initiatives, viewing their financial contributions as an implicit endorsement of a direction they find troubling. These discussions often touch on broader, systemic questions, such as how donations are truly used, the perennial need for greater financial transparency within church institutions, and the paramount importance of strong, unambiguous spiritual leadership that shepherds the flock without confusion. One phrase often repeated in these circles, encapsulating a profound truth, is personnel is policy. In other words, the individuals who are appointed to lead the church at various levels can have a truly immense and lasting influence on its practical direction, its theological emphasis, and its pastoral approach. Some Catholics feel there is a widening gap, a disconnect, between the timeless teachings of the Church, which they cherish, and the specific individuals selected by the current pontificate to carry them out, particularly when those individuals appear to hold views that diverge significantly from traditional orthodoxy. For example, Bishop Mackinlay's recent appointment as Archbishop of Brisbane has drawn renewed and intense attention from Catholics who had earlier called for accountability regarding his controversial actions. While many had raised serious concerns about the wands exhibit in his cathedral, his subsequent promotion by Pope Leo signaled to many that church leadership not only continued to support him, but actively endorsed him in his new, higher role, reinforcing the personnel is policy argument. Meanwhile, across the globe, in Germany, another deeply unsettling story has surfaced, reflecting ongoing challenges and divisions in that powerful part of the Church. Over the years, Germany has become a focal point, almost a crucible, for intense debates about radical reform, especially following the devastating and widespread abuse crisis that profoundly shook the global Catholic community. Some church leaders in Germany have spoken openly and with unwavering conviction about the dire need for radical change, arguing that genuine systemic reform is the only viable way to regain lost trust and prevent future scandals. They have pointed directly to past failures, both moral and institutional, and asserted that meaningful, even revolutionary action is absolutely needed to prevent such horrific problems from ever happening again. These discussions often raise deep, existential questions. What kind of changes are truly necessary to heal the Church? How should the Church respond authentically to its past mistakes and sins? And crucially, how can it remain faithful to its core mission and divinely revealed truths while simultaneously addressing the complex needs and challenges of today's rapidly changing world? In the very middle of it all are ordinary Catholics, people who are desperately looking for clear guidance, spiritual truth, and enduring hope in a bewildering landscape. As the global Church continues its journey through a time of intense reflection and monumental decision-making, these diverse voices, both staunchly traditional and fervently reform-minded, continue to profoundly shape the conversation, pulling the Church in often opposing directions. Many faithful Catholics around the world have expressed a strong, collective desire to see the Church uphold its timeless teachings with unwavering clarity and to courageously encourage priests to remain faithful to their sacred vows, particularly celibacy and obedience. But in Germany, recent developments have led to ongoing, deeply troubling discussion and profound concern among traditional Catholics. A number of influential church leaders in Germany have not merely proposed. They have actively pursued significant, indeed radical to long-standing Catholic teachings, especially those related to morality, the sacrament of marriage, and the sacrament of ordination, explicitly challenging established doctrine. This movement is a central part of what they controversially call the synodal way, a process explicitly aimed at reforming church structures and teachings in line with modern, secular values, even if those values directly contradict immutable church doctrine. One of the most debated and controversial issues stemming from the German synodal way is how the Church approaches education on sensitive topics related to human identity and relationships. A very recent and alarming example comes from the Archdiocese of Hamburg, which has released new, binding guidelines for Catholic schools under its jurisdiction. According to public reports, these new guidelines explicitly promote what the Archdiocese describes as a contemporary, value-oriented, and scientifically based approach to education on human development. In their official statement, church leaders in Hamburg stated their goal is to help young people grow in self-awareness and take personal responsibility for shaping their own identities. The guidelines are titled Male, Female, Diverse, a conceptual framework for education, and are now considered binding for all Catholic schools in the Archdiocese. However, many observant Catholics and theologians have immediately pointed out, with grave concern, that the content of these guidelines differs sharply and fundamentally from traditional Catholic teachings, which are rooted in natural law and divine revelation. The framework heavily emphasizes modern social values and scientific perspectives, often placing them above the Church's long-standing moral and theological guidance, creating a clear rupture. The document explicitly encourages educators to recognize and affirm a wide range of identities and personal experiences, including those related to human sexuality and gender fluidity, concepts largely absent or even condemned in traditional Catholic anthropology. It also actively promotes the idea that individuals should be empowered to make autonomous decisions about their own lives and identity, including their sexual identity, starting from a very young age, undermining parental authority and the Church's role in moral formation. Some critics have justly raised profound concerns that these changes risk moving dangerously away from the foundational, immutable teachings of the Church, which are divinely revealed. They argue that by focusing more on modern, secular ideologies than on sacred scripture and the authoritative magisterium of the Church, these new approaches may actively confuse, rather than faithfully guide, the impressionable minds of the faithful, particularly children and adolescents. The German synodal way has been a topic of intense global attention, especially since similar radical reform discussions have taken place during the Church's broader synod on synodality, creating a sense of escalating tension. When these German efforts first began under the previous pope, Church leaders in Germany were cautioned to wait and move forward together with the global Church, maintaining unity. However, the German bishops have consistently continued to press ahead with their plans, often with open defiance. For many, the speed, scale, and radical nature of these proposed reforms have raised urgent questions about the ultimate direction the Church is taking, and how it can possibly remain united while addressing such deeply sensitive and divisive topics. As the conversation continues, many Catholics in Germany and beyond are left asking, with profound anxiety, how can the Church stay faithful to its core beliefs and divinely revealed truths, while also engaging, respectfully, but not uncritically, with the modern world's challenges? The educational framework released by the Archdiocese of Hamburg further illustrates this challenge, drawing from a complex combination of modern academic disciplines. According to the document itself, its concepts are explicitly based on findings from the human sciences, contemporary theology, and discussions from the German synodal way. One of the primary sources referenced in the guidelines is a professor emeritus from Christian Albrechts University in Kiel. His definition of human identity and experience describes it as a kind of life energy, something that expresses itself through the body, is influenced by various sources, takes many forms, and holds multiple meanings. This description reflects a distinctly modern, psychological, and often relativist approach to understanding human nature. However, many observant Catholics and theologians have critically noted that this view contrasts significantly and fundamentally with traditional Catholic teachings, which define human identity and dignity based on sacred scripture, timeless natural law, and the consistent magisterium of the Church, emphasizing an objective, God-given identity. As these new, often heterodox ideas continue to be introduced into Catholic education across parts of Germany, reactions have been, unsurprisingly, very mixed. While some welcome a fresh look at modern challenges, embracing secular concepts, others firmly believe the Church must remain deeply rooted in its core teachings and divine revelation to preserve clarity, unity, and its very identity. To date, these developments in Germany have not been met with strong, public, and decisive intervention from the highest church leadership in Rome. Some changes have received cautious guidance or quiet warnings, but few formal steps have been taken to explicitly halt or reverse the radical reforms being implemented. As the Church moves forward into this uncertain future, many faithful Catholics around the world continue to watch closely, praying intently. The decisions being made, especially around education, doctrine, and leadership appointments like Bishop Mackinlay's, will undoubtedly shape not only the future of the German Church, potentially leading to formal schism, but could also profoundly influence wider discussions and practices within the global Catholic community. In a time marked by unprecedented change and deep division, the critical questions remain. How should the Church authentically respond to the immense pressures of modern society without compromising its divine mission? What should truly guide its choices? Sacred tradition, new, often secular ideas, or a harmonious integration of both? And most importantly, how can the indispensable unity of the mystical body of Christ be preserved when local churches and leaders chosen by the Pope pursue such drastically different, even contradictory, paths? These are not easy questions, and the answers will define Pope Leo XIV's pontificate and the very future of the Catholic Church.